when the whole screw job happened, part of me could never believe that they would do that to me after as hard as I worked for them. And some of the guys come up, like I remember Vader came up to me about 20 minutes before my match. He goes, they're gonna screw you in the match. I know it. And I was like, I know, but what can you do? All I can do is go out there and try to stop it and not let it happen, and maybe believe that they have more integrity than that. But so after it did happen, I remember going home on the airplane even after the whole thing happened, and I remember the documentary guy that filmed it. I remember going, he was so happy. He goes, we got everything, and I'm like, you didn't get any of it. Like, how could you ever piece that together? How he did piece it together is a miracle, but I mean, he did piece it together. But I was so angry, I never thought anyone would ever know my side of the story. I always thought, I knew in my heart that I would never go back and work for him for sure. And so, I mean, I left and went home, probably a pretty angry guy. It's hard to be too angry when you're went from WWF and suddenly was in WCW, where I was making more money than I ever knew what to do with in my life. Well, I would have figured out ways to spend it, but I got a huge pay and like a jump in my pay, so I was making a lot of money, and I was I was trying to, I always get annoyed when people tell me that, or I hear that, like guys like Eric Bischoff say that I came to WCW with a broken spirit, or I didn't have any kind of heart to, I didn't desire to go for it anymore. And I was like, that's so not true. It makes me so mad. If I ever wanted to shine or, become really show how valuable I was to a company, it was the WCW. I came there trying to make nothing but money for them and turn the tide for them and be the wrestling champion that they maybe always were looking for. I was going to give them 100%. And I did give them 100% every night that I worked, but they really were a bunch of stupid idiots. And I can't even describe how stupid they were. They were like idiots. But so anyway, they did a lot to rain on my career too. Like it was not what it should have been, not what it could have been. And I think you can really look at Hulk Hogan for that. I mean, I think Hulk Hogan was pulling the strings on Eric Bischoff like a puppet. And he was such a piece of shit, really. I was always such a Hulk Hogan guy. I was all the years I was in WWE, I would have done anything for Hulk. I was a big supporter of his, and anything I could have done to help him, including work hard on his cards and stuff. I was a very much a company guy. He was always stabbing. What they should have done in WCW is put me with Hulk Hogan right, like in the first night I came, and done a big pay-per-view. And I don't know. I'm not saying I should have beat him or anything, but we should have started a storyline that would have maybe saved that company. But they were too stupid. And then, like when Bill Goldberg kicked me in the head and ended my career, it was such a lousy way to go because I didn't know my career was over. And when I did go home, and it took me a year to find out that my career was over. And right around the time I found out that I couldn't, my doctors told me that I could never wrestle again. Then the WCW fired me, and from the day I got hurt, my $1 million salary got cut. Every week it got cut in half, and got cut in half, and got cut in half, and kept getting cut in half till there was nothing left. And then they just fired me, which was such a lousy deal. I had, when I was in WWE, I had a insurance policy through Vince that even if I slipped in the shower, I was totally covered. My contract was paid in full. But when I signed with WCW, they gave me an insurance policy with Lloyd's of London. And if you know anything about Lloyd's of London, they don't like to pay anybody. They like those premiums. They like you to keep paying those, but when it comes time to settle up and pay when they're supposed to, they are total bull. They would not pay me, and I had to sue them, and I had to go through court. And I think when looking back on those times, I was concussed so badly that I really couldn't really digest that my career was over, and sort of get my head around it. Part of me was like, finally, I'm free. I don't have to go anywhere this weekend, and I can be home, and you like being home, but when you have a concussion like the one I had, I remember I couldn't watch TV, I couldn't listen to music, I couldn't, had even food. I can remember like my whole diet, like everything that I would eat, I had no, like you could have the best steak in the world and it tasted like liver, and nothing really mattered. I remember it's like, I remember my doctor described it to me as kind of like all the places that make you happy in your brain, that's the part that got whacked. That's the part that got kicked really hard. And, I didn't really understand it or take it all in so much at the time, but, I got hurt by Goldberg, and he called me 8 months after it happened and told me that he was sorry, which, really was irrelevant at that point. He never once called me after it happened, or I don't think he ever understood, or I don't know that he even does now or even cares that he honestly cost me $16 million in like 2 seconds and ended my career. And when I hear about Bill Goldberg going to Saudi Arabia making $3 million for a 10-minute match in Saudi Arabia, I go, you think he would have called me up and said, here, I'm going to send you something for it. But he's never thought of me once since he got hurt, or since I got hurt. And it bothers me a little bit to see all these guys go there and make enormous sums of money for a couple minutes work. I don't know. I have a lot of respect for Daniel Bryan, who didn't go. I don't know that I would have gone. I don't know that I wouldn't have. It's it was a lot of money, $3 million to a pro wrestler, especially Goldberg, who went there and wrestled for 10 minutes. And, it's a big paycheck. So, if someone offered me the same thing, I don't know if I would have turned it down or I would have accepted it. But anyway, I didn't really have a chance to digest a lot of what happened to me. And I never really had I was always like very angry inside. And then, of course, I know everyone knows too much about my stroke, but I had my stroke about a year or two after I got hurt, a little over a year and a half after I got injured with a concussion. I suffered a stroke riding my bicycle in Calgary on a bike path. And I think, when I suffered the stroke, it was definitely tied in with my concussion injury. But that for sure was the end of my career. It's like any thought of ever going back or burying the hatchet with Vince, or my concussion sort of slowly getting better, enough that I could have some kind of a match or do something, that was impossible at that point. And I think when I remember being in my hospital bed and being in a wheelchair those first 5 or 6 days, it was like really just really powerfully struck me how I'll never walk out to the wrestling crowd with the hands out and stuff like that. So I was very I took all that like really bad. I didn't like that, and I realized that when I had my stroke, I think that there was a part of me that realized that it doesn't do you any good. Like if I was going to give advice to everybody out there, it's like, when you suffer something really huge happens in your life in a negative way, and you hate somebody and you're so angry about it, it doesn't do you any good to carry it around all the time. I carried it around. I was liking it to carrying a big bag of rocks around. It was like every day I had to pick up these bag of rocks about how I'm mad at Vince McMahon and the screw job, and you lug it around every day. And then of course I had the stroke, and so it's like, I realized after I had my stroke, after about a year, maybe the first year or maybe going into like a year after, it's like how lucky I was that I got the recovery that I did have. And I learned the hard way that it doesn't do any good to carry around a lot of grief and heartache in your. So the idea that, of course, I would never walk out to the ring. I remember thinking I'll never do that again. That'll never happen. And when I suffered my stroke, I don't know how Vince got my number exactly, but I had a phone put in my room. I remember the day they were plugging it in. They just plugged it into the wall in my hospital room. And I remember thinking, like, nobody knows my number. No one's got it yet. And as soon as I plug the phone in, my phone rings, and I'm going, hello? And it's Vince McMahon. And it's like, I remember thinking, I was so mad. And it was a sort of, I got to have a drink.
Press on the wagon, everybody.
I didn't know what to say to him. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to, really, the anger was still there. And the anger would still be there for quite a long time. But at the same time, once upon a time, I had a pretty good relationship with Vince. And in a lot of ways, Vince was very much like a father figure to me. We had a lot of trust and a lot of, we were, I think, close friends for a long time. And I appreciate all the things Vince did do, including give me that first chance to be the champion for him. So there was a part of me that wanted to kind of make friends or reach out, or at least accept him reaching out. And there was another part of me that just wanted to slam the phone down and hang up on him. And so I remember talking to him, and he said, he said they were going to do another DVD on me if I wanted to. And I talked to him about my archive and my film, like my whole career. Usually whenever I finished a match in WWE, especially pay-per-view, I'd always come back through the curtain and Vince would be clapping and he'd slap me on the back and stuff like that. And I would always tell him, there's one for my archive. When they do the best of Bret Hart DVD someday, that'll be on it, that match. And then I would come in and say, that one will be on it. Then there was got to be 20 matches that are going to be on it. And then he'd say, it's going to be 3 volumes and all that. And it was like, I had high hopes with Vince at one time. And when he called me and told me that they'd like to do all that stuff still, and then he told me that they would like to put me in the Hall of Fame, and asked me if I would do it. And I said I would do it, and I knew I would. I asked myself that question before he ever asked me. I remember asking myself, it's like, if they asked me to do the Hall of Fame, would I go? And I remember thought, yeah, I'd go. I deserve to go.
What was it like the next day when you got to TV after Survivor Series?
Well, sure. Clearly, you're worried about going. I mean, but only just from I can, it's one of those things that I wonder what it's going to be like. What's the atmosphere, temperature going to be like? The only thing, but as far as what everybody thought, and hand to God, I didn't care. I asked about one dude, and when I went in, I said, "Where's Taker?" I said, "Where's Mark?" And they said he's in there with Vince. And I said, "All right." Because that was, because it's the same, and you have to understand, we've been there for a long time. We see, yada yada yada. It's two very different guys, very different personalities. But by this time, even then, we knew that, that there were two sort of pillars within the WWE that were going to be, for the most part, everything was sort of built around. And that's the only person I just need to know where he's at on this. You know what I mean? I just need to know where he's at, because if there's somebody you got to sit there and have a chat with, it's going to be him. We're going to have to, for all of this to move forward, he and I are going to have to find a way to, get simpatico on this. And clearly Vince knew the same thing, and that's why he was the first guy, he talked to the next day. And to this day, because it's one of those things that so much has passed that we've never even discussed it. I've never asked him what did he tell you in there? But he, I remember waiting on him, and he came out. He walked up to me, he goes, "We're cool." Off he went. I went, all right. And then it was like, and then it was all, you know, both barrels loaded. After that, it was whatever it is they wanted. We went, you know, we went full gear. And but yeah, I mean, and honestly, and I don't mean it in a bad way, but again, it wasn't. You know, it wasn't fun by any stretch. I mean, that's one of the things that I think over the years that it even, you know, Bret and I both, for us both to get sort of past our own sort of personal feelings about it, I think when we finally started putting ourselves in the other person's shoes, I think that's what helped you get it all over with. I honestly think when Bret realized that, like, okay, you know, what he heard me say enough times, like, hey, what, you know, it's not like I was thrilled to be that dude. You know, I mean, it isn't like I ever, when I was, you know, 12 years old, 15 years old, I sat at home going, I don't want to just be a pro wrestler. I want to be a pro wrestler, and then when I'm in it, I want everybody in that industry to hate my guts and be the most hated guy in the wrestling business. You know what I mean? That isn't what you hope for. And when I would leave this and the show and that image and that kind of junk and go back to San Antonio, Texas, and just be Shawn Hickenbottom and sit there in the mirror and realize, damn, dude, you're the most hated guy in wrestling. It sucked. It was absolutely, it was, you know, again, it wasn't anything you aspired to do. It wasn't what you dreamed of being when you were 12. And so and I think, you know, it took people a long time to, you know, sort of, because you do, I mean, it's very, you know, you get cut and, you know, all you can do is think about your own wound. You know, you don't really think about, you know, whatever, the guilt and all that junk that the other person may have, you know, felt about, you know, doing that to you or why they did it and stuff like that. And again, not that I'm looking for anybody to cry me a river, don't get me wrong. It was just, it's not like it was a blast. It wasn't, and like I said, so it, you know, one of those things that, I don't know, you're a grown man in a grown business, you got to man up, do it, and you go on. But like, all I ever tell people is like, you know, like, don't get me wrong, it's not like it was, you know, that's the gig you're looking for. Nothing's as big or as bad as anybody says it is. Our business is built on the fish story. Everything in wrestling, from what you see on TV to even the stuff you hear, read, and everything else, it's all overemphasized. It's all over dramatized. It's pro wrestling. That's what we do. You know what I mean? And again, and I mean it respectfully, but even you guys as fans do it. I have sat there with, whether it be 5 wrestling fans or 5 WWE wrestlers, I've sat there and I've watched something happen with all of them. I've watched them all describe it again to someone else, and it is, at the very least, 3 times bigger than what it was we all sat there and actually watched. That's just the way it is. That's what makes us all wrestling fans. That's why we're all here enjoying the same stuff. You know, everything is bigger and all that. So, but to answer your question, we were pretty darn bad, but no, I mean, and like I said, nothing is, you know, again, it's just the fish story. I mean, man, it was this big. All right, so it was that big. You know, but it is certainly, it's like, you know, Vince McMahon's always right. It's taking everybody's personality and just, you know, turning it up. And that's what all the stories are and everything else. We had a ton of fun. You know, we were a big pain in the backside. You know, and people still do it, and then we and countless other people sit there at the monitor, and you know, we're all a bunch of dudes. I mean, it's like a frat house sitting there watching the other guys out there doing stuff. You sit there and you know what I mean, make fun of them, bury them, do whatever. So yeah, I'd say easily 70 to 80% of it's probably pretty darn accurate. But I guess again, but to us it was, so are a lot of things, I guess, in wrestling. For us, I guess, let's put it this way, I don't want to downplay it, but for us it was our normal. You know what I mean? I guess the thing is, if you're raised around chaos, you know, chaos don't bother you that much. And so obviously it was. I mean, we all were tight. We all knew we were joking. Let's put it this way. So for instance, that's why fast forward 10 years later, or 15, I guess more 15 or 20 years later. So now I'm the old guy, all right? Now I'm the guy that's losing my hair and stuff like that. That's why we went ahead and joked about me doing it, all right? So I guess that was the thing about the clique and me and everybody else. So we'd sit there and when we were 25 or 35 and make fun of you, but at the very least, we had the balls when we were 45 to make fun of ourselves about the same stuff going on. And that's the part about the clique that always we didn't understand. How come it was okay to do it when you were 35, but at 45, all of a sudden you're looked and you're like, hey, brother, don't do that. Why not? I mean, you were making, you know what I mean? It'd be like me getting mad at Randy and Edge for going out and, you know, when they did the DX thing. You know what I mean? I mean, it was funny. It's like getting mad at them and hot at them for doing that, for, you know, for making fun of, you know, I don't know. Or it's like when dudes used to call me old or whatever. I don't know. I never thought to make me that mad. You know what I mean? Because to a 25-year-old dude, 45 is old. You know what I mean? And if he's 25 and the rest, I don't know. And I guess that's the thing. It's pro wrestling. What do I care? What, you know what I mean? I mean, I hate to break this to you, but like it ain't. I mean, the physical stuff, yeah, that's real. But like, you know, somebody else decides who wins and loses. Well, I'm sorry. Well, but I'm just saying. I mean, I've ruined it now, haven't I? Son of a. Well, I don't know. I'm just saying, let's put it this way. Like, I never got even in the, I wasn't anywhere near that cool. I never have been. You know what I mean? I guess that's the thing. I mean, we all understood all the sort of the BS that went along with it. And I suppose that's the thing that really stuck in our craw. And the bigger deal you made out of that stuff, and the more it bothered you, man, the more we put it on you. That's just the way it is. Because the minute you showed, you know, that kind of stuff bothered you, you know, it was too fun to give you a hard time about it. And so we did. And I guess that's, you know, so yeah, I mean, we were bad, but like I said, we thought it was funny. And I don't know, I go back now and it doesn't bother me. Let me tell you something, old man. You know, he's an HB kid. You're no kid anymore. It's like, no shit. You know, well, I mean, well, sorry. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm the one that calls myself old. Hell, I mean, you know, it's getting that way. I don't know. I didn't know I was supposed to be offended at that. I don't know. I am losing of course I'm losing my hair, for the love of God, and it's going great. I got hair on my back too, and in my ears and everywhere else. It won't grow. I don't. You know. I mean, I don't know that. I don't know. I don't have what it takes to let that kind of stuff bother me, man. I've been taking my clothes off on TV for 30 years. What the hell do I care?
But you talk about like, you know, the clique and the bad stuff that's said, but you won the WWF title at WrestleMania 12. We saw you ziplining there in the Anaheim Pond, and it was shortly after that you can kind of see on TV that you seem frustrated a lot, whether it's, you know, part of you as a character or in real life. Where did the frustration come from that you remember? What was it that just made you so frustrated about wrestling? Because you were one of the top guys, you were, you know, making good money, you were a main eventer. What was the frustration from originally?
Well, it depends on what era we're talking about. Lots of times I was frustrated.
Like 96 when you win the belt.
Yeah, well, you know what? I would imagine, like a lot, everybody knows about, you know, the friction between Bret and I, and then, and honestly, like some of that, and heck, even Bret will tell you. So half the time, you know, like we're mad at each other, and then half the time we're mad at the company because we're not sure if they're stirring it, making it worse. You know what I mean? So there were a lot of things. But you know, honestly, I will say, I think if I'm to be, you know, like as honest as I can be, and as responsible as I can be, I think a lot of it, certainly from the '96 standpoint, from the time of being a babyface and being the champion, it was it not being, you know, again, you hope and dream that it's this, that, and the other, and it wasn't. You know what I mean? It didn't go well. I didn't like being that kind of a babyface at the time. It wasn't enjoyable. It was a lot of pressure. I mean, you're doing everything under the sun. You're going here, you're going there, every personal appearance in the world. So a lot of that is on me, and then of course. You got all of a sudden now, for the first time ever, you're hearing about, oh my goodness, now everything's ratings and it's this and it's that, and now things, the pay-per-view numbers, and it's up now. It's on you to, if other people, if people aren't making enough money, that's on you, and then you need to be replaced. It's a lot of stuff going on, and I again, freely admit, did not have the maturity, did not have the, whatever you want to call it, inner strength, whatever the case may be, to handle that very well, and so I took it out on whatever it is I had to take it out on. Half the time it was on myself, but then the result of that was getting on TV and whatever, cussing somebody or doing something. The one thing I will say is that when we went to Monday Night Raw, you absolutely never knew what it was you were going to get out of me on live television. And there was a time, even then, and not to imply in any way, shape, or form that this added to any frustration or anything like that, but certainly that's also one of those things that it doesn't take you long to figure out that, oh my goodness, I mean, the more outlandish I get, this is live TV, this is all of you guys listening and watching and hearing. I mean, if I wanted to vent to somebody and I wanted to tell them the truth and let them know really what's going on back there, I could come out here and do it, and they couldn't stop me, because by the time I said it, it would be out over the airwaves, because it's live TV. You know what I mean? And so that was what caused a lot of, and that was, depending on one's perspective, okay? So I was, whatever I was, 30 some odd years old, doing the job that I wanted to do, getting paid okay for it. But at the same time, man, I was willing to go out there on live TV and take a risk every week about getting fired. But I was just so angry and pissed off, I just didn't care. So half the time I went out there and I was just gonna vent and rag on somebody. And that was honestly my opportunity to do it. That's why it came across that way. And I guess that's one of the things I always try to tell people. It's like, so if I wasn't doing this on live TV, how was it that you guys knew I was angry and frustrated? And you know what I mean? And most of it, because like you guys never came home with me. Like I don't ever remember seeing any of you guys in San Antonio. Being in my house or any of the places I hung out. And so clearly it was something that you guys got from the way I was acting on television. Which again, all accurate and true, but also over the years, I mean, clearly that seemed to make a difference. I mean, people were noticing it, and somehow it did make a difference. And I get it that even then, I get it that the internet started. I get it that there were, still smart fans and stuff like that, but not in the huge numbers that they are now. And the only way that really gets out is that you guys pick it up. You sense it, even from what you see on TV. It's no difference. I mean, that's one of the things I've learned in 30 years of doing this stuff. You guys sense what's going on, even behind the facade sometimes. And that's what I think is so cool about it, is that, if there's a genuineness in here, you guys somehow seem to always sift through all the BS and find it out. You know what I mean? And that was, I found that to be empowering way back then. So, the more you figure that out, the more you just, you keep letting it fly.
Obviously, Montreal is something that you've talked about 100 million times. I've thought if I was going to ask you any question, it's got to be something you've not talked about before. So, Montreal happens, you agree to do it, you agree to participate, but Vince McMahon tells you cannot anywhere publicly tell anybody that you knew about it. You had to pretend that, like Bret, you didn't know it was going to happen. The next day on TV, when you guys get there, Mick Foley said he went home. He didn't want to come back. What was it like for you the next day? Because it's still very raw, pardon the pun, but like you get to TV and you've got to now completely keep up this lie to everybody, knowing that one day if you tell the truth, they might be pissed that you've lied to them for years, like good friends or whatever. What was it like the next day when you got to TV after Survivor Series?
Well, sure. Clearly, you're worried about going. I mean, but only just from like I can, it's one of those things that I wonder what it's going to be like. What's the, atmosphere, temperature going to be like? The only thing, but as far as what everybody thought, and you know, hand to God, I didn't care. I asked about one dude, and when I went in, I said, "Where's Taker?" I said, "Where's Mark?" And they said he's in there with Vince. And I said, "All right," because that was it. Like I said, because it's the same, and you have to understand, you know, we've been there for a long time. We see, you know, yada yada yada. It's two very different guys, very different personalities. But by this time, even then, you know, we knew that, you know, that there were two sort of pillars within the WWE that were going to be, you know, for the most part, you know, everything was sort of built around. And that's the only person I just need to know where he's at on this. You know what I mean? I just need to know where he's at, because if there's somebody you got to sit there and have a chat with, it's going to be him. We're going to have to, you know what I mean, for all of this to move forward, he and I are going to have to find a way to, you know what I mean, get simpatico on this. And clearly Vince knew the same thing, and that's why he was the first guy, you know, he talked to the next day. And to this day, and because it's one of those things that, you know, so much has passed that we've never even discussed it. I've never asked him, like, what did he tell you in there? But he, you know, I remember waiting on him, and he came out, he walked up to me, he goes, "We're cool." Off he went. I went, "All right." And then it was like, it was all, you know, both barrels loaded. After that, it was whatever it is they wanted. We went full gear, and but yeah, I mean, and honestly, and I don't mean it in a bad way, but again, it wasn't, you know, it wasn't fun by any stretch. I mean, that's one of the things that I think over the years that it even, you know, Bret and I both, for us both to get sort of past our own sort of personal feelings about it, I think when we finally started putting ourselves in the other person's shoes, I think that's what helped you get it all over with. I honestly think when Bret realized that, like, okay, you know, what he heard me say enough times, like, hey, what, you know, it's not like I was thrilled to be that dude. You know what I mean? It isn't like I ever, when I was, you know, 12 years old, 15 years old, I sat at home going, I don't want to just be a pro wrestler. I want to be a pro wrestler, and then when I'm in it, I want everybody in that industry to hate my guts and be the most hated guy in the wrestling business. You know what I mean? That isn't what you hope for. And when I would leave this and the show and that image and that kind of junk and go back to San Antonio, Texas, and just be Shawn Hickenbottom and sit there in the mirror and realize, damn, dude, you're the most hated guy in wrestling. It sucked. It was you know, again, it wasn't anything you aspired to do. It wasn't what you dreamed of being when you were 12. And I think, you know, it took people a long time to, you know, sort of, because you do. I mean, it's very, you know, you get cut, and you know, all you can do is think about your own wound. You know, you don't really think about, you know, whatever the guilt and all that junk that the other person may have, you know, felt about, you know, doing that to you, or why they did it and stuff like that. And again, not that I'm looking for anybody to cry me a river. Don't get me wrong. It was just, it's not like it was a blast. It wasn't, and like I said, so it, you know, one of those things that I don't know. You're a grown man in a grown business. You got to man up, do it, and you go on. But it, like, all I ever tell people is, like, you know, like, don't get me wrong. It's not like it was, you know, that's the gig you're looking for. You know, it wasn't.
And one of the biggest criticisms of you as a wrestler, I mean, nobody's ever said, Shawn Michaels is a bad wrestler. But when we announced this tour, I remember there was 3 specific people from Glasgow, and they had tweeted us and said, is he bringing his smile?
What was that?
Is he bringing his smile? Because of the Lost His Smile promo. And
He smiled. I thought you looked like snail. What the? Sorry, I got you. So for us, it's smile. But I got you. Smeal.
so when you lost your smile,
Smeal.
but that's one of the criticisms is.
That's what I've noticed too. It isn't It's And I'm just kidding. You all are spectacular. I'm just being silly, but it's like because I spent so much. I've been over here more than I've been home lately. Between that movie and this tour and stuff, I've been over here a lot. So I've had an opportunity to take it in a little bit. So I apologize.
But one of the biggest criticisms of you as a wrestler is he would never put somebody over, or you would forfeit championships, or there was like a statistic of like he had 9 title reigns and he only lost twice and whatever it was. But like looking back now, like do you think was it fair? Were you against doing that, or do you think is it blown out of proportion?
Look, I don't know if it's fair. Is life fair? I have no idea. Beats me. All right? If you could win more than you could lose, would you do it? Name me another 190-pound guy that's done what I did in the wrestling business. Name me another 190-pound guy that you pay the money to come over here and do this stuff. It don't happen by magic, my friend. I'm being silly. Some of them true, some of them not. And like I said, and it goes back to, symbolic of like the WrestleMania conversation with Vince. We talk all the way around, just like we did about wearing my gear. And ultimately, it would be like, do I have to do this? Is this something you are telling me you want to be done? And if he said yes, I always did it. The problem that everybody has with it is that, well, I got to talk. I could talk him out of it. I could get him to go, and that's what it is. Are you sure? Because you told me that you were going to give me my opportunity, you were going to give me my chance, and you're telling me that 3 months, 6 months, whatever. When this other guy got this other guy again. All I've ever done in my arguments. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I could play one on TV, but is talk my, again, get my opportunity to speak my piece. And all I ever did was use, someone else's analogy, somebody else's stats, somebody else's whatever, and his own words, and put them back, and then, and that was it. So, and that was, and that was the only stuff I ever did. But ultimately, when he said he wanted it done, I did it. And I'll tell you why that is and why it's true is because you think about all the other guys who said no, he fired them. Nobody else is still here. Had I done again, at least the stuff that, you've seen DVDs and stuff like that. I mean, he's told people in interviews, taking more from him than I have from anybody. You know what I mean? And he's been on record. I'll never take it. And I'd never put him through it again. But I did. I put him through a lot. I probably aged a man more than anybody. And that's the only thing. And I don't say that gleefully or whatever. That's why when I went back in 2002, I came back and I said I was hard, and I would, I am here to help. I am absolutely going to do my best to leave this place better than when I come in. Because I know I didn't do that the first time. Just like when I came back and he said, look, the first time we did this, and he did, in 96, he said, I want you to enjoy this. And I said, I will. And I didn't. And when I came back in 2002, he said, you remember in 96? I said, yep. And he goes, and you didn't enjoy it, did you? I said, nope. He goes, I want you to enjoy this one. I said, I promise you I will. And I did. And that's all you can do, because that's the thing. And I get it. And as a wrestling fan or whatever, and when you're on the outside looking and all that, it's just a job and it's just a this, for you guys. But you have to understand, I've been there since I was 23. This is my life. Okay? That's why I'm still here. This was his life. I've spent more of my adult life with the people in that company. There's 2 men who I've been around, the most powerful men in my life, my dad and Vince McMahon. There hasn't been 2 more influential men in my life than those 2 men. I was a big pain, I was all that stuff, but ultimately, I've always done what he asked me to do, and I've always held him to, again, like, do I have to do it? And when he said yes, I did it, and I always tried to do it well. But again, but make no mistake about it, as I said, no, I was, like I said, I was 90, easily, I'll say 90% of all the stuff people said I was, for the most part. I've always just said, look, I've always, especially when I came back in 2002, I admitted to all the stuff that I did. There isn't any stone I've left unturned. That's the thing. That's why I can do this stuff. That's why, it don't embarrass me. I don't worry about anything. I got nothing to hide, okay? The only thing I'm not going to do, and that's what the wrestling business wants, and people do that, which is once you start rolling over on the stuff you did, they start wanting to pile on more. And I'm not going to, pardon my language, I got no problem stepping up for the stuff I did, all right? I'm all man in a yard frickin' wide, all right? But you don't get to lay more stuff on me. If it didn't happen, it didn't happen. If it did, I'll tell you, but I've earned my right. I don't have to take any.
Bruce Pritchard, too, he doesn't know. Yeah, I meet all these guys. I meet so many of these guys, from Vince Russo. Bruce Pritchard is another one. Jim Cornette is another one. They all take credit they were all involved in the screw job. They all had a hand in it. They all were part of it. And it's such bullshit. When I watch stuff, I go, Eric Bischoff didn't have anything to do with what happened that day. And Vince Russo doesn't know anything about what happened that day. He was like nobody. He had zero involvement in what I was doing with Vince, and had no idea what my contract was. I don't think Vince Russo even knew what my issues were with the company. And same with so many of the guys that they have people that they want to be involved, like Vince Russo and Bruce Pritchard wish they were part of the screw job, and that they could have been involved in that, and that they could have had a say, and yeah, screw them, they wish they could say that, but they had zero to do with it. Today they want to take credit for it, that they were involved in it. To me, it's like taking credit for being part of an assassination or something. It's I don't know why you'd want to throw your hat in the ring and say I was part of it. But they all seem to want to, convince themselves that they are that important. But I don't think they were. I know Jim Cornette, who's always been nice to me and a good friend to me, but he had zero to do with anything that happened with me in WWF. And for him to think that he had some kind of stake in it, or he was one of the guys that put what happened down, what happened to me was part of his, he had some say in it, is just hogwash. They had nothing to do with anything to do with me, period.
I'm in ringside. I'm also the head of talent relations, meaning that if there are any major issues of how this fallout went, I've got to hear all of it from the talent, because they want to know why. Why were we betrayed? Why was there's mistrust here? Why were we duped in this whole thing? Did you know what the finish is going to be? All these things. So I had to have that same conversation with 25 or 30 guys, and we had guys that wanted to go home. They wanted to quit. So all you can do is
Mick did. I had to be the one to talk him into coming back.
He quit
2
for a
days
day.
later, he missed the first TV.
Yeah, missed a couple of days there. But nonetheless, I didn't, I'm out there with Lawler. Here's the thing, like I mentioned earlier. Lawler and I did our best work when we didn't know the finishes. I've had people that they believe I'm lying, and I don't really care. You believe what you want to believe. That's your prerogative. I didn't have any, when Foley went off the Hell in a Cell in 97 or 98 I think it might have been.
98.
There's somebody here got a shirt on with that Foley shirt. I think, my God, they killed him or something, whatever it says. Yeah, that's it. So I just think that, I knew that when we went out there, it wasn't a big deal. It was a whole pay-per-view to do. In other words, when you are broadcasting a pay-per-view like we're going to do tomorrow night, it's not about one match. It's about one match. When you get to the last match, it's about one match. You with me? One match is the last match. But other than that, it's a whole thing. We're obligated tomorrow to get talent over at every match, and the angle over, and the storyline over. So if they're gonna play good music, we'll give them some damn good lyrics. I promise you. So it'll be good stuff. So, but I didn't know when the last we heard, at least I can speak for myself, and I think Jerry would concur, it was going to be a DQ. So, because I remember Jerry asked me, he said, "You know what's going on in the last match?" I said, "I don't know. I think it's a DQ." And I didn't even know who was going to get DQ'd. I just heard it was going to be a DQ because I didn't care. I didn't care in the sense that, oh, Jerry, you didn't care about what went down? No, not that. I didn't care what the mechanics of the match were going to be. It was going to be what it was. You're going to put it on the monitor, and we're going to narrate it. We're going to give you a narrative. So I had no idea what was going to happen.
I'll say one thing. There's the guy that took credit for air and water and the birth of Jesus Christ and everything. Now he came up with, oh, well, I told Vince he ought to do it. Let me tell you something real quickly. I had no idea either. It passed when we had the production meeting in Montreal the night before the pay-per-view. That's when Vince said, we're going to get the match in the ring, and boom, and thank you very much. And he folded up his book. And I went up to him, and I whispered in his ear. I said, have you got to finish? Because I'll tell you the backstory here in a second. He said, yes. I said, that's all I want to know. For 2 weeks, and once again, Shawn Michaels, I'm sorry. He was a to me. He was a everybody I liked. He was my friends. He was a the company. He was as selfish. And as we've come to find out, he told Bret Hart he would never put him over. So I don't blame Bret for not knowing what I know now. I don't blame Bret for not wanting to put him over because of what he had said. I didn't know that then. Because me and Stain and Bruce Pritchard was there also, are having to sit in Vince McMahon's house day in and day out coming up on that, doing nothing but twiddling our willies while Vince is on the phone with Bret. And he's on the phone with Shawn. And he's on the phone with Bret. And he's on the phone with Shawn. Okay, he's a billionaire control freak, so I couldn't just say, Vince, why the did you not take the belt off of him before you goddamn breached his contract? Which would have made some sense. Why did you make a goddamn deal? No, wait a minute. Why did you make a goddamn deal with the guy to begin with for 20 years when you weren't going to keep it for 6 months? That's another thing that would make sense. And I was frustrated because I lived in Connecticut. I was 278 pounds, eating myself into a heart attack because I was miserable there. And one day I got mad talking about one guy that's making $1 million a year, and the other guy that I liked, but he was going to make $3 million a year. And I said, God damn it, Vince. And I take credit for blame for this if I have to. I said, God damn it, Vince. If it means that much to you, double cross him. Book him with Shamrock. You'll get your fucking belt back, right? Well, I can't do that, pal. We've advertised Michaels and Bret. I said, you can't pull that fabulous moolah Wendy Richter cinch up on a small package with Bret and Shawn because Bret Hart will kick out of that and beat the out of Shawn Michaels right on live TV. And of course, and Russo's sitting there with those big, huge eyes going, what's a double cross? Because he don't. And hey, and I'm telling you right now, and I swear to a God I don't believe in, but I also swear on my mother's life, Vince Russo was as clueless as a goddamn putz about the whole thing. He didn't do nothing, but after that, we went on and on and on, and finally it's going to be a DQ, and he's worked it out, whatever the Never in a million years would I dream. And see, this is where accident breeds money. Why did Vince go out there? If he just had the referee signal for the bell, then people would have not known. But because he went out there, everybody knew something was going on. And in his mind, he thought that people would identify him as the sympathetic billionaire, that everybody would be on his side. And instead, he made himself the biggest heel of all time. But that came from his mind that somehow he's going to get the belt back, and he's going to do it in that way that blew the lid off the reality and the credibility of the business. And now everybody knows what's going on, which for better or worse is where we've been ever since then.
That was an answer, ladies and gentlemen, to that question. So I feel like we've talked about 1997 enough. We should really move on because we got into 1998, and we...
You didn't pay the electric bill?
Ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only, Bret the Hitman Hart!
we were actually looking for a You Still Got It.
He never lost it.
Thank you guys for letting me come out here and join in this very interesting chat. Who's starting?
Kenny, why don't you have a mic and I'll give Bret mine.
We thought if we were going to talk about 1997 in the WWF, let's bring in the most influential guy from 1997, Bret the Hitman Hart, live here tonight. Because I think we should say this here right now that, a lot of people talk about the fact that, Vince McMahon eventually got hit as a character. People eventually beat him up and people were doing storylines that maybe they were realistic. But the first guy to do those things is right here, and it's Bret Hart. And 1997, it just seemed like to be a different year for you. You were on point in every way. There was the Hart Foundation. Do you look back on that fondly now, 1997, as a year and getting to work with your family and going across Canada and doing all that stuff?
I always thought 1997 was my most productive year in the business. When you look at 97, like just the start of the year, right from Steve Austin, I wrestled at WrestleMania, going all the way through to SummerSlam. I had so many really good matches with so many people. Even the Screwjob, the match itself was a pretty good match. The truth of the match, as I remember it, is that we still had a whole another part to the match coming up. We brawled mostly out on the floor before they got us in the ring, and then we just followed the storyline we'd mapped out in the dressing room. But it was a pretty good match. If the Screwjob had never happened, that would have been a really good match that you would still be talking about today. But they did the Screwjob, so.
And I also, with 1997 and being the WWF, talk a little bit about the Hart Foundation getting together with all of you, Anvil, Bulldog, Owen, Pillman. It looked like you were having the most fun doing that stuff.
Well, we all really were friends, and we all kind of started out together, and we all had worked in Stampede Wrestling with my father for a long time. So there was sort of a natural bond that we all had, and Brian Pillman was really like part of the family. He was a different guy, but he played football, I think, for the Calgary Stampeders, and he when I first met Brian Pillman, he was up at the Sunday dinners all the time with the rest of the family and stuff. So it's not a far reach to go, yeah, he was like family. He really was like family, and I think he got his start up in Calgary. And when we all ended up together, Neidhart was the one that was the last one to join. I always loved that idea that they had where Anvil came out and we ended up pushing Steve Austin, I think, off the stage, and he landed on the cement floor or whatever, and below the stage on one of those Raws, I think. But the way everything happened, it was really fun. I remember, I think for Owen, Davey, myself, and even Jim and Pillman, everyone was really happy with being put together, and the whole Canada-US thing was kind of, I don't know, it was an interesting sort of perspective on how do you do this? We're going to be good guys in Canada and bad guys in the United States, but it really had a sort of a newfound kind of magic to it. It was really, people really got into it, and especially in Canada. even now, I get, there's a lot of patriotism that comes from Canadians about me walking out with a Canadian flag and things like that, which we don't get to do that much, especially on American television. So, I mean, for me as a Canadian and as a wrestler in that whole time period with Owen and Davey, it was the most fun I ever had as a wrestler. It was so much fun going into it. You know, the Stampede pay-per-view that we had up in Calgary, just being in Calgary and having my mom and my dad and everybody in the front row, and all the the Hart clan scattered in the crowd, and it was really a magic time for me. And you know, when I won the title from The Undertaker in SummerSlam a few months later, I just thought it was such a great match, one of my best matches I ever had. And you know, I thought if you asked me in August how I thought things were going, I would have thought things were going pretty good. And you know, I always think, and maybe Jim can say otherwise, but I think there could have been so much, like so many better things could have come if I could have stayed there. And I think when you really look at the Screwjob and what it did and what it was all about, it was really wrong, you know, really bad way to do business. I was totally legally in the right to do what I was doing. You know, in fact, people try to, you know, they dismiss it a bit today, but Vince was the guy that told me, he goes, you can drop the belt any way you want, you can even forfeit it. Those are words that came out of Vince McMahon's mouth when he first told me that, you know, it's not a case of, you know, people think sometimes that I had some kind of big up problem or attitude about losing a match in Canada, and it had nothing to do with that at all. I mean, I lost lots of matches in Canada. You know, it just was, when I look at it, I think it was, maybe I can be, Jim might know better, but I think it was Triple H was the guy that kind of spearheaded the screw job. It was not a very good idea. I think it set a bad example for the company, for wrestlers down the road. Like, you know, when you see things happening in wrestling today, I guess like Brock Lesnar and John Cena, and you know, they don't have to worry about being screwed in the ring, I don't think, because I think they've learned now that it was a pretty stupid way to do business. And I just wish that I hadn't been the guy that they did it on.
I do want to say one thing. There's been the rumor or the speculation or whatever. Everybody said, oh, Vince had to do this because Bret was going to show up the next night on Nitro with the belt. And that's there. That's a good word to describe it. Because number one, you couldn't take the belt. That was a legal precedent had been set with Flair. Number two, Bret had given his word, and Vince actually believed that. Vince said, I believe that Bret will keep his word that he would not show up on the TV, even if you could. Where the guy he didn't trust was Bischoff, because he thought that Bischoff, who'd already had Medusa dump the women's belt in the garbage can and all the other things, he thought that Bischoff would come out and say, I've signed the WWF champion. Even though he was the top star of the WWF, they couldn't keep him because I wanted him. That's what Vince was scared of, Bischoff saying that, which would have been, in his mind, almost the same thing. But people have said, oh, they were afraid Bret was going to come out. Not only did Vince not even believe that, but also we knew you wouldn't have done that. I just want to say that right now.
You know, I had no intentions. I didn't even want to leave the company. I remember telling Vince for 2 or 3 months going into the Survivor Series, like, because they were trying to squeeze me out of my contract. They wanted me to take a cut in pay or adjust my salary. So they said they couldn't pay it anymore. But I mean, when you really look at the facts, you know, and if you, I don't know if anybody out there has read my book, but you know, Vince McMahon, he had told me that I could forfeit the belt, I could leave any way I wanted. He basically told me that the company was doing so badly that they were going to downsize the company and they were going to become a Northeast promotion. They were going to only work in the big cities in the East Coast. They were going to become a more regionally. Basically, he was saying he couldn't fight Ted Turner anymore. And then he had suggested to me that they couldn't pay me anymore, and that they would have to cut my contract down or do another one, and that I'd be free to go to WCW if I wanted. And maybe it wasn't too late for me to go and get the same deal that Eric Bischoff had offered me a half year before. So I kind of, I reluctantly sort of reached out to WCW to see if they were interested in me still, and turned out that they were interested in me and were going to pay me even more than they were originally to come work for them. And I think somehow that, the thought that, yeah, I can get my deal with WCW, it's still there. I think that must have bothered Vince that maybe that I could still get that deal. So the wheels started rolling, and I remember telling Vince over and over, I said, I don't want to leave this company. I've been with this company from the beginning. I think I was one of the, at that time, I was probably one of the longest, I had the longest career there of any of the wrestlers. Maybe me, and I don't even think Mr. Fuji was around anymore. Me and Finkel, yeah. But so I had a lot of years and a lot of loyalty, and I loved the company. I worked from the very bottom to get to the very top. I took a lot of pride in everything that Vince did for me and what the company did for me. And I had no illusions about WCW. I knew that Eric Bischoff was a total idiot. And I knew that every wrestler that ever came from WCW, from Steve Austin, and they always had the most horrific stories to tell about what a screwed up place WCW was. And so even Owen, my brother Owen had been there, and I remember him saying, "You don't want to go there." And I was like, "I know I don't want to go there, but there's only two choices here. You know, you can go A or B, and I'm getting pushed out of A, so I gotta see what I can do with these other guys." But yeah, I had a lot of great matches that year, and I think that Jim might remember. I remember I flew down to Connecticut to negotiate a contract that because my contract had expired while I had been off, and I flew down, and I had thought about it a lot on the plane about what I was going to do, and I had come down, and I remember I met with Jim and Vince, and we talked about signing a contract, and at the time I kind of I said I don't really want to sign a contract yet because I'm not sure when I want to come back, because I was trying to sort of launch a film career at the time. But I remember we talked about. My understanding was when I left that meeting that day was that I was going to come back, and that I was going to have a bit of a chip on my shoulder towards Shawn, and I was going to start ragging on him for not being a good role model, and that because I remember watching him on TV, and sometimes he'd pull his pants down and show his pubes and all that, and I thought, being the so-called hero babyface of the company, that's not a good way to present yourself. I just remember sort of making note in my head, and the more I watched Shawn doing stuff like that, where he'd pull his pants down and get the kids dancing and all that in the ring, I remember going, it would be easy for me as a babyface to take exception to what Shawn doing. But I thought, really what it was a good chance for me to make a storyline here with Shawn where, I've lost the title to him at WrestleMania 12, and I got a bit of a chip on my shoulder that I lost, and the way the whole thing was set up was perfect for me to come back with a bit of an attitude about Shawn. And what I had wanted to do was work a storyline with Shawn where I wrestled him at WrestleMania. We would have had a really good match. Shawn was a great wrestler, one of the best I ever worked with, and probably the best I ever worked with in a lot of ways. And I had an idea where I was gonna, like maybe if you can visualize, like, it's like 35-minute match. Me and Shawn have, tore the house down with a really great match, and the place is going crazy. Like basically a duplicate of the Iron Man match, sort of all over again, but we wouldn't go the full hour again. But I wanted to do a thing where Shawn was stomping his foot, getting ready to give me that big kick, and I'm in trouble. Like I'm pulling myself up from the ropes from the other side of the ring. And Shawn goes to give me that big kick as I sort of stagger over to him, just like at the Iron Man match. And except for this time, I would take Shawn's foot and catch it in the air and bring him to the ground and put some kind of a shoot hold on his foot and break his foot right in the middle of the ring. And then I wanted Shawn to tap out like they do in UFC, where it's like, you know, when you break somebody's arm, they tap out pretty fast, and everyone jumps in, and it's a very serious kind of thing. And I wanted to break Shawn's foot, and then they'd hand me the belt and all that, and I would walk over and stand over top of him and go, "F you." And I thought that that would give Shawn the sympathy. Like I come back and I beat him, you know, really strongly with a really harsh finish like that. He would have come back a few months later, and we would have wrestled again for maybe next year. WrestleMania would be the third match that we have, or SummerSlam, or whenever we'd have the third match we had, and then we would have a match where I drop the title to him right in the middle and give him the big push for like where he'd be the champion for a long time. But I thought it was a good way to get sympathy. I also thought that you know, Shawn has those motorcycle boots that you could kind of make those boots, like gimmick them or take them to a prop guy that would sort of make that boot sort of click like you could actually twist the boot where it's sort of like a socket wrench or something like that, where it locks in place in a funny position. So when I grabbed Shawn's foot, he could pull his foot, like his sock, a little ways out of the boot so it's in the calf area. And then I would take that boot and I'd just snap it all the way around, and it would lock in a position. And it would just be lying in the ring with the boot in a really funny position where you go, geez, his foot looks broken. And I thought it would have been...
actually just done it for real.
Hindsight, you know, but anyway, I thought stuff like that. I remember I went away from that meeting, and I think that was in August, and it was like a good meeting, and I felt really good. It was kind of like it was something that we were going to probably do down the road, and Vince seemed to like the idea, and Jim liked it. And I remember that day I got on the airplane, I was flying through Dallas, and lo and behold, Shawn Michaels is on the exact same flight with me, and he's sitting right beside me. And he was doing a photo shoot or something in Connecticut at the same time. But I remember I sat with Shawn in the seats on the airplane, and I said, Shawn, I just talked to everybody about it, and I told him what was going on, and I told him my idea about the boot and everything. And you could see the color drain out of his face. I mean, he just hated that idea. And I thought, you know, like, this is a really good idea that could be really fun to do. And we could get lots of mileage out of it. And we could wrestle each other for the next 5, 6, 7 years here with all kinds of great storylines and great history of maybe go back and forth the belt lots of times. And but I remember Shawn did not like that idea. And I remember trying to tell him, I said, you know, the thing about that we got here is we got everybody in the dressing room. We had most of the people in the office. But everybody thinks we hate each other. There's a big problem here. I said, I don't have any problem with you. It's all, and the things I'm going to, like the way I would build my story or this storyline would be, I would have to do it on a kind of try to make it seem like a shoot. So I'm going to come out and be really kind of like I said, with a chip on my shoulder and kind of say a lot of things about you that as a baby face that you're not a role model. I said, but, you know, I think that the key here is that everybody thinks we really have a lot of tension, and that is so hard to find in wrestling when you've got two guys that have a storyline where everyone thinks they hate each other. When you know, like Steve Austin and me had the same storyline that me and Shawn had, except for the difference was that Shawn took everything serious and was offended by everything I said, and Steve understood that it was somebody trying to do business with him and trying to make money with him. And that's why I look back today and I have a lot of regret about what happened, mostly because I think if I'd stayed, we would have had some awesome matches. And the best stuff was yet to come, never happened. The stuff I could have done with Steve Austin and then in the next year or two after I got screwed over and never happened. Never got to work with Undertaker, never happened. A lot of guys that were coming up like Rock. I mean, I would love to have worked with Rock. I had a lot to do with helping him and being a supporter of his and when the first day he started there. You know, there was a lot of guys that like Edge, and I can just name all kinds of guys I would love to have worked with. And I wouldn't have got kicked in the head by Goldberg. So.
As we sort of wind down here, the last slide that I'm going to bring up here kind of ties everything together. It was, you'd left WWF, and then in January of 1998, there was the confrontation on Raw with Steve Austin and Mike Tyson. But JR, I want to ask you, how important was the rivalry that Bret and Steve Austin had to get Steve Austin to that point where he was able to stand in a ring with Mike Tyson, one of the biggest guys in entertainment or sports, and have that moment?
Easiest way to answer that question is, and I think I probably know Austin as good as anybody in the room, and he'll tell you, I think, the same thing. I know he'll tell you the same thing. We've talked about it. Steve Austin would not be Stone Cold if it wasn't for Bret Hart. End of story. Because what happened, we talked about new and reinventing, and Steve was being reinvented. I remember one time telling him, you're going to do a commentary, you get to feel it. And if you've been out there as tenured as I was on that show and in that company, you could feel certain things. If you had any instincts and still had your passion about it, you could tell he was going to be a giant baby face. Now, did we know he'd be as big as he was? I can't say that for me. I'd like to be able to say, oh yeah, I knew. No, I couldn't. But we thought he was going to be really big. He didn't want to be a babyface. He loved being a heel. He loved working their rugged style until I got him off the side one day and we talked about royalties. And, well, you know, he had never been in a situation working in Tennessee, working in world class, working in WCW, where royalties were even an issue, non-issue. That was one of the great things about WWE, it's still there today, is that they have a systematic marketing plan where the talents get paid quarterly royalties. And some of that royalty money can be really life-changing. So I knew what Hogan had made royalty-wise and other big stars, Savage, so forth. I didn't give Steve the numbers. I said, but do you realize that you can make $500,000 a quarter selling T-shirts? And everything stopped. You could almost hear the wheels, the gears clicking, going around. Ironically, I said, you don't have to change your style. You don't retreat anyway. You don't even work like a heel, which pissed him off. How could you expect to work like a heel when you never retreat? You don't cheat. You don't lie. You don't deny. All you do, you're just a badass. What about being a badass as a heel? Nothing. Well, so I critiqued his work, and he wasn't overwhelmed with my critique, but nonetheless, I believed it to be accurate. I said, so you don't have to change your style. Wrestle just like you're wrestling, but you'll just be on a different side of the fence, wear a different jersey, different team. And so, lo and behold, on down the road, back to the royalty question, he kind of got hot. He had one quarter where he made over $1 million in one quarter in 3 months of work, just selling gimmicks. They ain't counting payroll money, pay-per-view or live events or whatever. He got to where he needed to be. So, but the only way Steve would have been there was to be given the classic rub. And he had to be in the ring with somebody that people had great respect and confidence in, that they believed in. And Bret made sure that when he worked with Steve, that Steve was elevated and shined and made better. And that's what we don't see a lot of that today because there are too many fragile egos, too many guys that really can't work. I was talking to Corny earlier today about the business today a little bit. A couple observations. There's so many young guys that work in WWE, for example. There's other companies too. New Japan's got a ton of them. Ring of Honor's got some of them. I don't know how the guys make any money in TNA, but that's another issue. But the bottom line is this. You got a bunch of guys that are making way above six figures, way fat six figures in WWE that have never sold out a house. They've never set the market on fire on their gimmicks. They're at the right place at the right time. It reminds me of Coach Barry Switzer, my friend at Oklahoma University, said, yeah, that guy. I said, what about this guy's kid? He said, oh, well, he was born on third base and woke up and thought he hit a triple. Meaning, he just had to be there. I don't know whether they get baseball. Oh, probably not. I'm sorry.
Good analogy.
Sorry. Point being is that a lot of guys hadn't earned it. There's nobody there to give a rub to. They're uncomfortable giving their best to make somebody else look better than them. Bret had no issue doing that, and I will say it the last time, if Bret Hart had not come along when he did to work with Steve, I doubt very seriously that Austin could have gotten as big as he was because that launched him, and he took the ball and ran with it.